Welcome to Make It Last, helping you keep your legal ducks in a row and your nest egg secure, with your host, Victor Medina, an estate planning and elder law attorney and certified financial planner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Make It Last. It is the show that helps you keep your legal ducks in a row and your financial nest egg secure. I'm your host, Victor Medina. I want to thank you for joining us this Saturday morning as we talk about things that dealing with your retirement planning, legal planning, financial planning, all that good and fun stuff. I'm happy you're joining us here today. We've got an exciting show for you. I think it's exciting anyway, because I'm going to be talking about how and when you should update your estate planning documents. You know, too many people go through life thinking that their estate plan is something that they should put in place once and never touch ever again. And it's just not the case. And so we're going to take up segments 2 and 3 of today's show and let you know when and how you should be reviewing your estate planning documents to make sure that they work when you need them. But before we get to that, I have been on a search, as many of you fine listeners have been following along. I've been on a search for a new car. And part of that is because I have leased my car, because lets me kind of write it off through the company. But I've leased my car, my lease is up. And it's now time to look at a new car. And I've got different options. I can purchase a car and then take a deduction off of that, in a Section 179 deduction, or I could lease again. And as I've been having discussions with my parents about it, I realized that they really didn't understand how auto leasing works. And I thought, well, if they don't understand how auto leasing works, maybe you don't understand how auto leasing works, and maybe we ought to talk about how auto leasing works. And so it sounds like it's a big mystery because the pitch is always about a monthly payment. They're going to have you come in and they're going to pitch you on some monthly payment. And you never quite understand how to get to the number that they're getting at. And you don't know if they're playing funny games with the calculations. So I know that leasing can, for some shoppers, can seem like it's dark and mysterious as the deepest reaches of outer space, full of confusing language, weird fees, and payments, but you can figure this out without an advanced degree in mathematics, right? So let's talk a little bit about what leasing is and how it differs from purchasing, right? So you know that when you lease a car, you don't own it. Well, when you lease a car, what you're actually doing is paying rent on the value of the car for the time that you have it. So just like an auto loan, you can lease a car for 36 months, 48 months, 60 months, 24 months. But it's essentially a contract where you're going to rent for certain usage of the car. Okay? Now, that usage depends in the contract, or the value of that depends on how much you're actually going to use the car. And the metric that they have to measure how much you're going to be using the car are the number of miles. So often you will see that lease offers are contingent on using a certain number of miles throughout that period. And we usually think about them as miles per year. So an average number is anywhere between 10 and 15,000 miles per year. Now, obviously, as the number of miles per year go up, you will be paying more because you'll be using more of the car for the time that you are under your rental agreement. And that kind of makes sense for people, right? They make sense that you're going to be using more of the car, so you should pay for the other part of the usage. But how is that expressed in the numbers? Well, one of the most important numbers you can focus on is the residual value of the car. Now, the residual value is how much value is left over at the end of the term of the lease. So if you're going to lease it for 36 months and promise to only use 10,000 miles per year, then the financing company is able to assign a value to that car, which they call the residual value. So it's going to be affected by lots of things, the residual value. It's going to be affected by the number of miles that you drive on an annual basis. It's also going to be affected by the trim level of the car, how popular it is, where you reside in the country. So your different geographies will affect the residual value. And so this is a number that's arrived at by the financing company. And one of the things you should be doing is you should be asking about what residual value they're going to assign the car at the end. So when you tell them, you have to give them some information. You got to tell them up front, I'm going to be using it for 36 months and for 10,000 miles. What's the residual value? And they're either going to give you a number or they're going to give you a percentage. Percentage is the most easy way to do that. Now, as a rough guide, I've been talking about a 36-month lease. That's the most popular one. Most cars have a residual value between 45 and 60%. And that's the value at the end. So the higher the number, the more the car is worth at the end of the lease. And therefore, the less money you'll be paying, because you'll only be paying for the amount of the use that you have. So if it's worth more at the end, then you're only going to be paying for the 40% or so that it is there. So that's one number. Now, there's another number that you have to pay attention to is the capitalized cost. Now, the capitalized cost is actually essentially the negotiated sales price plus any fees. And so what will happen is that they will give you some price. You'll negotiate off of the sticker price, right, or up from the invoice, but you'll arrive at some number. So this is what I'm going to pay for the car. And then you'll add in whatever fees that are associated with that, transportation fees, so on and so forth, but you'll get to a gross capitalized cost. And then you take off any rebates, which they call a capitalized cost reduction. So now I started with my gross capitalized cost. That's the sales price of the car plus fees. I subtracted any capitalized cost reduction like cash down or a rebate. Okay, and that's the reduction. And what you're left with is an adjusted capitalized cost. Now, we took the residual value and we multiplied it against the sticker price, because that's what it's worth at the end. You go sticker price to sticker price. You don't do the residual value against your negotiated price. So you go against the two. And so now you have a depreciation amount. So when you subtract the residual value from your adjusted capitalized cost, that's the amount that you are paying for. So now we take the adjusted capitalized cost, we subtract it against the residual value, which is the residual percentage against the sticker price, and we come up with a depreciation amount. The next thing that we do is we divide that depreciation amount by the number of months in the payment. Okay, so then we get to that. Now, that's going to be a really small number. Don't get excited about that, because we have not added in a rent charge and we have not added in taxes, state taxes on it. So the rent charge is actually arrived at by taking your adjusted capitalized cost, adding it to the residual value, and multiplying it times the money factor. Okay. Now that money factor is the amount of interest being charged per month. It's basically what the rent charge is. And we would add it to the base payment. By the way, if you want to figure out what your interest rate is on that, take the money factor and multiply it times 2,400. Okay. But that's the rent charge. Now we add those two things together, and that's your pre-tax lease payment. You multiply the lease payment against your sales tax, and then you get your total amount. And the easiest way to do that is to take your sales tax, if it's 7%, and multiply your pre-tax number against 1.07. And that will give you your total amount of your payment. So if you want to arrive at a lease payment and how leases work on the numbers, that's the way that you do it. So hopefully that's been eye-opening for you guys. It's been eye-opening for me as I've gone through that. Something I kind of knew the last time we did the lease stuff, but I thought that would be an interesting discussion for you. Now, when we come back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about estate plans, why they grow stale, and why you should update them. This is not a set it and forget it activity, so join us when we come back on Make It Last.
Hey folks, there are more than 500 different ways to claim your Social Security benefits, and most Americans will rely on their IRAs and 401ks to survive retirement. The pressure to make the right decisions at this stage of life can be enormous, as are the consequences for making a wrong decision. Victor Medina, host of Make It Last, is a certified financial planner that specializes in helping people in or nearing retirement. Working with families that have been diligent savers and who value a trusted advisor, Victor is able to put together a customized total protection retirement plan that helps clients answer 4 important questions. Can you afford to retire? Are you overpaying your income taxes? Can your portfolio be improved? Can you eliminate or reduce threats to your retirement? It's never been more important to make sure your ducks are in a row, and it's never been harder to make your nest egg secure. The time to act is now. Call 609-476-9269 or email info@privateclientfamily.com to schedule your no-cost, no-obligation first meeting and get on the road to total protection.
Everybody, welcome back to Make It Last. We're talking today about why and how you should update your estate planning documents. Now, look, I know that going to visit a lawyer about estate planning is about as exciting as scheduling a voluntary root canal. Because the truth of the matter is that when you think about your estate plan, it's one of those things that you should get done, but there's no crisis around getting it done. For most people, they're not visiting with an estate planning attorney because there's been something that's happened in their life that requires them to have estate planning documents. By the time that happens, it's too late for most people. So they're not visiting with an estate planning attorney. They might be visiting with a guardianship attorney, or they might be visiting with an elder law attorney to get qualified for Medicaid, or somebody to help in probate. Basically, time's up. So when we visit with an estate planning attorney, we're doing some proactive planning. We're putting our adult hat on and we're doing some adulting, and we say, okay, look, I ought to have an estate plan in place. Now, because it's not a ton of fun to be thinking about what happens when you die and what happens when you get sick and whether or not you want your kids to inherit something or be in charge of money or anything like that, because that's not fun, people tend not to do it as a regular activity of their adult lives. To go in and see an estate planning attorney once, they'll put some documents in place, and then they'll forget about it. And the reason why that's a problem is what you need for an estate plan is a moving target. So let me try to make that case for you, because we're often in a position in my law firm of trying to fix problems caused by stale estate planning documents. Now, the estate plan might have been perfect when the person put it in place, but they did that in the Nixon era. They did that during Reagan or Clinton. They did it in the first Bush, never mind the second Bush. And they haven't looked at the estate plan since. And it might have been perfect when they put it in place, but there are 3 moving targets that make that estate plan at risk, that put it at risk that it's not going to work when we're going to need it. Now, one of those is that the laws themselves change over time. So, before the year 2000, the estate tax exemption was only about $600,000. And I say only because today it's $5 million, so quite an increase. But it was only about $600,000 or so. And people who put an estate plan in place might have visited with a lawyer that put that number in their estate planning documents. As if my estate is greater than $600,000, then I want you to do something special or different with how we do the tax planning. Because the laws have changed that number, have increased it over time, you can get an adverse result by compelling certain planning to be done on that threshold, on that number threshold. And so when the tax laws change, it's an opportunity to review your estate plan to make sure that it still works. Listen, here in New Jersey, about 2 shows ago, by the way, we talked about New Jersey in inheritance and estate tax. And if you didn't listen to that show, or if you don't remember, last year, in the year 2016, we had a change in the law that increased and eventually eliminated the estate tax for New Jersey. Well, everyone who has a plan that was pre-2016, that has some number attached to do estate planning and estate tax planning, are going to have out-of-date documents. And that's just within the last 2 years. So if you have an estate plan that's older than 2 years, it's time to review it because the laws have changed. The laws have changed. The second reason to do it is a little bit harder to quantify, but I'm going to see if I can't make it a compelling reason for you, which is that the state of the art changes over time. Now, what that means is that what we do as estate planners, or what I did as an estate planner 15 years ago, is not what I do as an estate planner today. And it's not because I've gotten brighter, or it's not because I've gotten more experienced and learned how to do it better. It's because the state of the art, the tools that we use, and the way that we use them have improved over time. Think about it like an iPhone. Right? I was able to do something with an old iPhone when it came out 10 years ago, but what I can do with a new iPhone in this year is so much more. Now, was it my fault that I put an estate plan together with a 2008 iPhone? No, because that's all I had at the time. But if my clients are only stuck with a 2008 iPhone, they're missing out on a whole bunch of features that have just improved their chances for a great plan and potentially their outcome. Now, the third reason why you need to review your estate plan is actually the most compelling. So I've saved it for last because then it brings me right up to a break and there's a whole teaser thing before we come back. But the third reason why we do that is because your personal and your financial circumstances change over time. So if you're at home listening now, I just want you to visualize something, okay? You let me know whether or not, as you review your past history over the last 5 years, whether you own exactly the same assets that you owned 5 years ago. You haven't bought anything or sold anything different, certainly nothing that would be included in your estate plan. You haven't changed the way accounts are titled. You haven't changed, they haven't changed companies. They changed it on you. So if you own exactly what you owned 5 years ago, realize that's only the year 2012. That was one presidential administration ago. And most people can't survive that inquiry if I ask them to go back 10 years. And 10 years is the new millennium. That's the 21st century. So do you own exactly what you owned since the new millennium? For most people, the answer is no. The answer is no. And so if you own different things, you should be reviewing your estate plan in light of the fact that you own different stuff. Now, the other reason why you're going to want to take a look at that as part of the third reason is two things: personal, financial, and personal, both of those together. Now, your personal one is this. How many people have had no changes in their personal circumstances for the last 5 or 10 years? No one's gotten married, divorced, been born, died, changed, moved, changed their names, right? These are all reasons why you would review your estate plan, because if your personal and your financial circumstances have changed, the target that you're aiming at may have moved. You took aim when you put this estate plan document to say, look, when I die, which is sometime in the future, I'm going to fire this arrow in this direction and I'm going to land on the bullseye because I've put a great estate plan together. But when your personal and financial circumstances change, when the tax laws change, when the state of the art changes, you get a different bow and arrow, okay? The target may have changed, and your ability to hit that target may not be as good as it would be if you reviewed your estate plan. Now, I'm going to tell you the most cost-efficient way to do that and what areas to review of your estate plan. But remember, those 3 reasons are enough for you to be looking at your estate plan and updating it before we have a problem. So when we come back on the next segment, I'm going to talk to you about what specifically you can do, how you can save money so that you don't have to buy a brand new estate plan every single time, and what to look for in your estate planning documents which will trigger whether or not you might have an out-of-date plan. Stick with us when we come back on Make It Last.
Hey, it's Bert. I hear a lot from people that the one asset they're most interested in protecting from the devastating cost of assisted living or nursing homes is their own home. The team at Medina Law Group can meet with you to discuss options to help protect that home, including their special Home Sweet Home Trust. It's designed specifically to protect the value of your home in the event that you need long-term care in the future. Just call the experienced elder law attorneys at Medina Law Group at 609-818-0068 to learn more, including your chance to schedule a free consultation. You can also visit MedinaLawGroup.com to learn more about protecting your assets and the Medina Law Group team. For peace of mind and a solid foundation, call Medina Law Group at 609-818-0068 or visit MedinaLawGroup.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Make It Last. We're talking today about how and why you should update your estate plan. Now, in the last segment, I did talk to you about reasons why to do that, because your personal and your financial circumstances could have changed, the tax laws could have changed, and the tools and the skills that your estate planning attorney may have had at his or her disposal 10 years ago are not as good as what they are today. Everyone's gotten a new iPhone. By the way, I'm a big iPhone fan. Those of you who know me, I'm a big Apple nerd. And this is being broadcast on September 9th. And so if you're listening to this between September 9th and September 12th, they've got a new iPhone event. And I will be glued to my computer trying to figure out what the new iPhone is going to be. The iPhone Pro. No buttons. Really excited. Anyway, getting back to estate planning. We've made the case for why you need to do the estate plan update. Now, the question is, what exactly do you have to review? And, what are you going to be... How can you make an assessment about whether or not it's time to adjust your estate plan? Do it in a cost-effective manner. Now, to do that, I got to talk a little bit about the way that my law firm works. My law firm works mostly in trying to get a plan that works for our clients. It's sort of a simplistic way of doing it. And when we created the estate planning firm, one of the things that we did was we thought about updating in a brand new fashion. Because most estate planning attorneys think about updating as a brand new plan that you start fresh every single time that you talk to them. And that's really not very customer friendly, because if you believe as a client that you got to start from $1 every single time you need to update your estate plan, you won't visit with anybody. It was hard enough to go for the voluntary root canal 6 years ago. You're not going to do it again, especially if it's going to cost you as much as it did last time. So we created a system that allowed people to routinely be reviewing their estate planning documents, and we're trying to change their behavior around that. Now, I know that sounds a little manipulative, but I do it because I know that my clients will end up better at the end of the road if I'm able to get them in a regular habit of reviewing their estate plan. So in my law firm, what we do is we offer a client maintenance program. And I suggest to you that if you're not working with our law firm, then whoever your lawyer is, you should ask them about a client maintenance program. Because the way the client maintenance or client update program works is that we visit with our clients who are on the program every year. And every year we produce a brand new updated plan. Now, that's done deliberately because if we're meeting every year, it gives us an opportunity to match up changes that people have had in their personal and financial circumstances with changes in which they know about, right? The client knows best about that stuff, with changes in the law, which I know about. And so we have this regular meeting and say, I kind of know about this stuff. And they say, well, I kind of know about this stuff. And we look at that both together and say, do we need to make any updates? And we'll produce a new estate planning document because remember, just like the iPhone, there's a new one that comes out every year. So every year, the state of the art of what I'm doing changes. So I want my clients to get the best estate planning documents and estate planning practice and strategies that are possible. And so by doing that with inside of a new document, a new set plans every year, we're able to do that. Now you think to yourself, geez, that must be awfully expensive. And it's not. And I don't want to talk about numbers here, but figure that it's probably only 3.5% to 4% of what you initially paid to set up a plan. Somewhere around there on an annual basis. And if people aren't going to do that in our law firm, we're going to see them once every 3 years to check in. Now, the downside to only seeing us once every 3 years is, while we don't charge for that meeting, if we have to make any plan updates, we do charge for those plan updates as a kind of like an a la carte service. But looking at things on an annual basis takes away the analysis as to whether or not you should be doing it. You're automatically doing it. You're doing it every year. So now we don't have to worry about making a bad judgment call about whether we need to do it. But here are some triggers for you if you're not working with a law firm that's got a client maintenance program the way that we do. You should look to see whether or not people's names have changed and whether or not there have been any births involved, because you likely want things to follow a bloodline. So you will go ahead and talk about having it go to grandchildren. And so if you have new grandchildren, or if you have a child that unfortunately passed away, or something else has changed about your family situation, that's a great time to review your estate plan. The second thing you want to do is look at who's in charge of your planning documents. So you had people that you named as a power of attorney agent, as a healthcare agent, as a trustee of a trust, as a executor of a will. You have people in positions of responsibility. Review them. Make sure that they're still the best people for those jobs. Are they local? Have they moved away? Do they have too much on their plates? Did they prove themselves as not really responsible? And so you're not really sure about whether or not they should continue on. These are the types of things that you'd be thinking about for whether or not to make a change. Another metric you can use is the time since your last update. Now, I focus on the timing aspect as a measure because more and more financial institutions are rejecting powers of attorney that are too old based on a policy that they have in place that it's got no bearing in law. I mean, there's no law that says that you have to reject a power of attorney older than a year or 3 years, but they have an internal policy that does that. And a couple of shows ago, I don't know, maybe more for like 4 or 5, we talked about powers of attorney and how they can grow stale. So if you have a plan, now I know this is going to sound harsh, but trust me, I've lived it on the other side of where there have been mistakes and plans that don't work. But if you have an estate plan that's older than 3 years and you haven't had it reviewed or updated, you are at risk for failure, specifically in the area of a power of attorney, which you don't know when you're going to need. You don't know if you're going to need a power of attorney used for incapacity because you can't predict when you're going to become incapacitated. So I look at that 3-year mark as essentially the right mark to be reviewing your estate plan and at bare minimum, signing new power of attorney documents. Those things need to be updated on a regular basis, regardless of whether or not you've made any changes to who should be in charge, or regardless of whether or not you've made any form changes to the power of attorney itself, that it's been updated or not. You definitely want to take a look at that. So let's summarize those real quick before we kind of punch out from this show. One of them is take a look at the people in your lives and make sure that there haven't been any changes about where stuff is supposed to go. People haven't died or been born, made a name change, there isn't a new grandchild, there isn't a new distribution that you want to have. So look at first as the people where stuff is going. Then look at the people who are in charge and review whether or not they're still the right people to be doing that. Do they still have the capacity to get that done? Like, is their plate, empty enough to take on this job if you need it? Are they looking at moving away too far? Or do you think that they're not responsible enough? So number 1 is the people where stuff is going. Number 2 is the people that are in charge. And the third one is look at your date. That's a really easy one. If you have a power of attorney that's older than 3 years, I'm going to urge you to go back in and get that updated. And while you're there, you might as well take a look at all the other stuff that we've talked about that might be tax law changes. And if you focus on this stuff, you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty about whether or not there's an estate tax exemption. It's the wrong number. Let your estate planning attorney do that. That's what they're there for. They'll review the substance of the document to make sure that it works. But you can focus on the stuff that you know best, which is it too old, right? You may have lost touch with your estate planning attorney. They don't know if it's old or not. Is it too old? And are the people the right people? And if you focus on those, you'll make sure that you're updating your estate plan on a regular basis and in a schedule that puts you in the best position to have it work when you need it. So that's today's show. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback for us, you feel free to send us an email at feedback@makeitlastradio.com. Go to iTunes and leave us a great review so that other people who care about retirement planning, legal planning, and people who haven't touched their estate plan in 5 years can go listen to an episode that tells them to go and look at that stuff and make sure that it's been updated. Leave us an iTunes review. And other than that, I want to thank you for joining us today. We will catch you next Saturday on Make It Last, where we help you keep your legal ducks in a row and your financial nest egg secure.
The foregoing content reflects the opinions of Medina Law Group, LLC and Private Client Capital Group, LLC. and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security or to follow any legal strategy. There is no guarantee that the strategies, statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs.